But the next steps, what you choose, who guides you, and how clearly you understand your options can change everything. Tonight, or today, whenever you're listening to this, we have Dr. James Benton. He's a renowned radiation oncologist and president of Radiotherapy Clinics of Georgia. He joins us to break down the treatment journey with honesty, clarity, and hope. Brothers, this is a conversation that you need to hear. So, welcome to If You Are My Brothers podcast, and go ahead and share this link with a loved one, especially someone you know who's been recently diagnosed. This is an episode he should not miss. We'll be right back.
So we have a confirmation with a second opinion that he definitely has prostate cancer.
Welcome back. I'm Reggie Hicks, producer of the documentary and outreach project If You Are My Brothers, and the host of this podcast, the If You Are My Brothers podcast, Prostate Cancer Conversations. And we want to welcome everyone watching on YouTube and Facebook Live, and to those listening on your favorite podcast platforms later on in the week. Our guest today is renowned radiation oncologist Dr. James Benton. He'll be joining us in just a few, but first, as always, a quick reminder, this podcast is not a substitute for your medical team. The opinions and medical issues we discussed are not a replacement for treatment. Always consult your healthcare provider for that. And remember, some conversations that we have may be of an adult nature, so we ask you to please listen accordingly. Again, as I always say, we call this series Prostate Cancer Conversations. And so we invite you to join us in the chat with your questions and comments. Don't be shy, because this is real life. And remember to like, share, and subscribe as we go on this journey together. And I can't emphasize enough, really, to share. Even if you're not watching it live, if you watch it later, you may want to share, particularly this episode, with someone that is going through making a decision, maybe recently diagnosed. And what we're doing, there's a series within the podcast program that we have that we're going to be doing specifically on treatment options. This is one of them. So all of the episodes will be archived on our YouTube channel, and also on our website, ifyouaremybrothers.org, and also on all of the podcast platforms. So if you want to go and look at the different treatment options, we'll have a special guest on and experts like Dr. Benton tonight, who will be joining us in just a second. Um, Again, if you want to learn more about the podcast, obviously, and the research and documentary project, ifyouaremybrothers.org is the website. So we hope you give us a visit. Now, our guest this evening, today, is radiation oncologist with decades of experience specializing in prostate cancer treatment and other cancer treatments as well. He's president of Radiotherapy Clinics of Georgia. They have, I think, 4 or 5 locations here in the greater Atlanta area. He's known for championing personalized community-based cancer care. And this is a little bit about his background. Education-wise, he's a graduate of Armstrong State University. He's a Morehouse man, Morehouse School of Medicine, and also the Medical College of Georgia. He completed a residency, his residence in internal medicine at the Medical College of Virginia, and a second residency in radiation oncology at Emory University, where he was chief resident. And most importantly, he graduated from Saul C. Johnson High School, home of the mighty Atom Smashers, which happens to be Dr. Benton's alma mater and my alma mater as well. So I want to welcome Dr. Benton. I knew you back when you were James, so so
I
forgive me
still,
if
I still am.
so forgive me if I kind of revert back to that. Just so glad that you could be here. I know that you had surgery today, and you've been really busy, and we just appreciate you coming on and being a part, and also thank Eleanor for me, your wife. We all grew up together and went to school together, and I think she kind of stayed on you, I'm sure, to keep you on track, right?
Always, you know that.
So, you know, this particular episode, we're really going to dive into radiation oncology. I know you do a lot of other types of cancer, but you know you also specialize in prostate cancer. So before getting started, specifically with the different treatment options and things like that, what motivated you to get into? You're an internist, right?
Correct.
And then you kind of made that switch that went down that road of radiation oncology. How did that happen?
Well, it's interesting, Reggie. As you said, I did internal medicine first. I was in practice in our hometown, Savannah, for three
Hmm.
years. And my hero is my grandmother, who raised me.
All right.
And she developed gastric or stomach cancer when she was
Mm,
in her 80s. And I was doing internal medicine. But that's what really sort of changed my direction. I became more and more interested in oncology, just in general.
mhm.
But that really precipitated my interest in radiation oncology.
All right. Um, and I noticed all over the kind of the website and you've been interviewed before, you know, you really emphasize in what you do, quality personalized cancer care in a community setting. So what does that personalized care look like in your day-to-day patient interactions?
Well, my first, when I first have a conversation with the patient, you got to understand it's not just a patient, right?
Hmm.
He's a father, he's a brother, he's a nephew, he's part of a family network. So I really come at it from that perspective. And it's all about focusing in on that individual need because, there are now over 8 billion people on the planet. I think we went over 8 billion in
Hmm.
2022.
Right.
So during the course of an individual lifespan, one out of four human beings will develop some type of cancer. That's over 2 billion people.
Mm.
And so when you're sitting down with that one individual, you really have to understand what he is when we're talking about prostate cancer. What is it that you're trying to do to get this patient from being diagnosed with cancer to being treated with cancer to being cured with cancer? That's the process. There are different kinds of treatment options out there. There's no
Hmm.
one way to treat prostate cancer. And I'm a radiation oncologist.
Right.
There are different forms of radiation. So when a man walks into my office, basically they want to know two things. Okay, what will be my outcome
Hmm.
and what are some of the potential side effects because I don't want my quality of life to be adversely affected in any significant or insignificant way.
Hmm.
I want the maximum benefits, whatever those benefits are, and I want the minimum potential side effects. So I really focus in on his life and what it is he's trying to accomplish, but more importantly, how do we move him from the diagnostic stage to the treatment stage to the follow-up stage and then to the point to where the cancer is cured? And every man will take a different step.
Hmm.
There's no one way to
Right.
do it. So I try to really put myself in his position because let me just tell you, sometimes it's not a matter of if we're going to get prostate cancer. If we're fortunate enough to live long enough, it's a matter of when we're going to get it.
Gonna get it right.
And so if you're going to be diagnosed with prostate cancer, to the extent that you can, and we may talk about this, but you want to detect it in its infancy as early as possible because that's going to give you the highest probability of curing the cancer. So it's really just trying to connect on that individual on a personal level that he has some confidence and trust in you that you're going to do the right thing for him.
Let me ask you this. Before we get into the various treatments, have you, because you've been doing this for a while, for decades, um, when men come in now, are you seeing them coming in earlier in this journey, or earlier on in your career, did you see men coming in, you know and with huge PSA numbers and maybe some cancer metastasize? Are we seeing any change in getting, particularly among men of color, are we seeing any change in getting diagnosed early?
Yes, it is borne out in the statistics. So if you go back 20 or 25 years ago, of all the men presenting with prostate cancer, 19%, that's almost one out of five,
Hmm.
would present with metastatic prostate cancer. That is, the horses had already left the barn.
Right.
So fast forward to 2020, 2022, that number has dropped from 19% to 4%.
Oh, wow.
And so, what is the variable there? The variable is early detection. And so, part of that is just getting, you speak in terms of the community.
Hmm.
Well, you have to get out into the community. Well, how do you do that? You go to churches. Um, we had this one thing where we went to barbershops, giving literature to barbers so they
Hmm.
can give out to their clients. But you have to be in the community. They have to see you and know that you're there and not just put up a sign and say, come to us. And so, yes, I wish more and more men will come earlier. It's always the exception where some man will come. And unfortunately, I saw a gentleman 2 weeks ago
Hmm.
and metastatic disease. Now, that's more the exception than the rule. Most men come because their wives
Right.
have encouraged them to go to their primary care physician and get checked.
Hmm.
And as a result of that checkup, they drew a blood test, the so called PSA, and the PSA was elevated, and that precipitated a referral to the urologist who may have referred the patient to me.
Hmm.
But the answer is yes. We are seeing men coming early, and that's evident by the fact that the mortality rate, prostate specific mortality, has dropped. It has dropped in all ethnic groups, but specifically it's also dropped in men of African heritage.
Hmm.
Now, the rate of drop, unfortunately, is slowing down. We don't know why that is the case,
Hmm.
but it is dropping, and it is dropping because of early detection.
So that 4%, 19 to 4, is that hold true for men of color? Or is that just the general one, or?
That's the general drop.
Hmm.
Actually, for men of color, initially that drop was more steep, and the reason for that because of the PSA screening. But what happened in 2012, the United Task Force on recommending certain screenings suggests literally that men stopped getting screened.
I remember that.
And
Yeah.
that was terribly unfortunate. And you know what happened? More men presented with advanced disease, more men presented with metastatic disease. And that rate went up disproportionate
In
in
our
men of
area. Yeah.
African heritage.
Hmm.
Because if you think about it, men of African heritage are probably 73% chance more developing prostate cancer.
Wow. Do
But
we know?
the mortality rate is twofold
Mhm.
than the white counterparts. That is, African American men are twice as likely to die from prostate cancer than
Right.
the white count. That hasn't changed in over 20 years.
Mm.
Now, there's some confounding reasons for that.
Hmm.
Obviously, access, not access to health care, but access to quality health care.
Mm.
Insurance is an issue. Genetic predisposition is men, for whatever reason, not listening to their bodies or listening to family members as it relates to going to the physician. Some men don't have trust in the healthcare system.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's a black face or a white face on the other side of that table.
Right. Yeah.
And you can sometimes trace that back, unfortunately, to the Tuskegee experiment. That has left an unfortunate legacy in the minds of especially men in their 70s. And I hate to sort of throw that out, but just quickly, the Tuskegee experiment was an experiment about syphilis.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in Tuskegee, Alabama. And unfortunately, these men developed syphilis, and the government sanctioned a trial
Right.
to just observe these men and not treat them when the treatment was so readily available. Now you think of that in 2025. That's inhuman.
Right.
These men subsequently died of their disease when the treatment was just a simple shot of penicillin. And some African American men remember that experiment. Now, from their perspective, they say the government gave these
Gave
men
them.
syphilis,
Right.
but
Right.
they didn't give it to them. They just didn't treat them.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we're left with that legacy, and we're having to contend with that. And the reason being because the coordinator of that experiment, if you will, was a black nurse.
Hmm.
Okay.
Wow.
And so, but anyhow, we're just going to have to get past that and understand that prostate cancer is highly, highly curable if you detect it early.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever we do from this podcast, really want men to understand that this cancer is highly curable, but you need to detect it early.
Let me ask you this, and then we're going to get into the treatment part. Do you ever have someone come into your office and you talk to them and you can kind of tell either they don't come back, and I guess you probably wonder did they have treatment or not, but can you kind of sense that this person is just not, they're not accepting it, they're not, they maybe have been coerced to get there by their significant others, but it's just not soaking in. Do you get that feeling sometimes?
Oh, that happens. Luckily, it does not happen that commonly, but it does happen. The body and the mind they're very interesting. When you're given bad news or news that you really don't want to accept, the first thing sometimes is try to deny it,
Yeah.
right? Deny that it's not that bad. Maybe I can go off and do some alternative health. Maybe I just change my diet, change my lifestyle, and this cancer will just sort of go away.
Mm-hmm.
People deal with the C word very differently. Remember,
Yeah.
cancer is just a 6-letter, 2-syllable word, but it is cancer, and the connotation from that word will affect people very differently. And some people will certainly try to negotiate that cancer away. And you can sometimes tell just by their body language, because when you're speaking with them, they're there, but they're not there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You're just trying to connect.
Yeah.
And what I do in those cases, I just give them space because, they may be dealing with some other issues, and just give them space to talk. And other times, just don't talk about cancer. Sometimes they may be interested in sports.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about something, you get them engaged so they can develop some confidence in you. And occasionally that will work and they will open up. And other times you just have to follow up. Just give them time and space to absorb that information.
Right.
But we all are wired differently. Every single one of us, we deal with these things very differently. There's no one way to deal with it. Whether it's talking about cancer or something happened to you economically or your wife, it's that emotional trauma.
Right.
It's not like cutting where you bleed and you see something and you heal it. That emotional trauma can be very, very deceptive.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of understanding and, more importantly, just listening to them. It's amazing what happens when you just listen to them and give them time. Some of
They'll
them,
come
sometimes they'll
around.
come around, right?
Look, as long as you don't talk about the Falcons when you talk about sports.
Well, that's even more depressing. So, no, you don't talk about the
We'll
birds.
talk about that. Let's talk about treatment. You know,
Hmm.
you are and where your organization is dealing with radiation therapy. You know, you've got what external beam radiation therapy, internal. I know you don't do proton,
Right,
um, but I guess internal is like brachytherapy.
right.
And I read that you all have some really advanced technologies, the
Oh,
True
yeah.
Beam and the Halcon and radiation system. Can you talk about the differences and just kind of what are the options? So I'm coming to you and I'm really considering
Sure,
um, radiation treatment. Oh, and we're going to talk about that first, and then we'll talk about prosticision because I'm really
sure,
interested in that.
sure. Well, let me first say that, radiations was discovered in the fall of 1894 by a German physicist, Dr. Roentgen. So radiation hasn't changed. The essence of radiation hasn't changed since it was discovered.
Hmm.
A proton is still a proton, an electron is still electron, beta rays still beta rays, gamma
Right.
rays. Those substances are fixed in the universe. You can't change them. What we can change in a revolutionary way is how we deliver those substances to patients so they get the best benefits with the least possible side effects.
Hmm.
So, yes, there's external beam radiation. This is radiation generated from a machine. There's internal radiation, where we insert radioisotopes, if you will, directly into the epicenter where the cancer is located. And it gives off small doses of radiation. Now, let's concentrate on internal radiation. That's
Hmm.
called brachytherapy, which means short radiation.
Hmm.
Every single radioisotope on the planet will have what we call a half life. Let's take what we use. We use a specific isotope, radiation called iodine 125. And there are thousands of isotopes, okay?
Hmm. Okay.
We just use this one because it has certain physics to it. But every single one of them have a half-life, which means over a certain period of time, it will lose half of its activity. For example, iodine 125 has a half-life of 59.4 days. So about every 60 days, you'll lose half of the activity. For example, on day one, you will have 100% of the activity.
Hmm.
Day 60, you will have 50%. Day 120, you will have 25%, 12.5%, 6.125%, respectively. So it takes about 4 half lives for radiation to get to what we call background radiation.
Right.
Now, contrast that to radium. You know about radium. Radium has a half life of 1,600 years.
Oh, well,
All
yeah.
right. So uranium, uranium has a half life of 4.5 billion years.
Mm,
That's the age of the Earth.
mm.
Okay, you never get rid of it.
Right.
So when you start talking about different half lives, you got to know half life means some of these things will stay around in perpetuity.
Right. Right.
So you have different isotopes. You have iridium, you have iodine 125, you have palladium, you have all these terminology, but ultimately it targets the DNA of cancer cells and destroy the cancer cells. That's internal radiation. You can't do that for every site, but you can do it for the prostate because the prostate sits right in the middle of your pelvis. It's just an ideal organ to do
Mm.
brachytherapy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas breast cancer and lung cancer, you're sort of limited because of the geometry.
Right.
Now, not every man you can put to sleep, because for brachytherapy, you need to go under light general anesthesia.
Oh, you got to sort of be awake, kind of, sort of.
No, no, you go to sleep.
You go to sleep.
Have you ever had a colonoscopy?
Oh, yeah, yeah. That twilight. Yeah, yeah.
You go
Okay.
to, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hopefully you went, you went night night for a moment.
I did. I also went wake right at the end, and so I was like, I looked up and they were still like clipping a polyp or something. I said, "Whoa, wait a minute,
Well,
what's going on?" I mean, I was still in twilight, sort of, but no, I was just.
well,
But
they
that did
they
happen the
didn't
last
give
one. They
they
give
didn't
you
give you
enough,
enough. They didn't give you enough of the milkshake, right?
right? Now this is when you were injecting the seeds, right? So
Correct.
yeah, yeah,
Only
okay.
when you're inserting the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's internal radiation, but we can give radiation externally without the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
We have different types of machines. You mentioned them.
Mm-hmm.
Proton beams. We have true beam. We have halcyon. We currently are working on something called variant edge. All of these machines, what those machines do, the essence of those machines are very similar. Then they begin to diverge a little.
Okay.
Let's take the true beam. That's an external beam. That's called a linear accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
So in that machine, it generates electrons, which are negatively charged particles. And they speed those electrons up to the speed of light. Okay, one
Mm-hmm.
times 10 to the 8 meters per second, or 387,000 miles per second.
Wow. Sound
Those
like I'm on the,
elect
the Enterprise.
all right.
Yeah.
Now, but you're not being treated with the electrons. The electrons are there to make what we call photons. So those electrons are charged into a metal substance. And that interaction of the negative electrons with the substance, that interaction create photons, which
Okay.
are chargeless. They don't carry a charge. They travel as what we call a wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also going at the speed of light. That's photons. Now you have protons. Proton is a positive charged particle. It's a particle beam,
Right.
but it only goes 2/3 the speed of light. And it has a certain physics where it can deposit radiation around a target, and then you get fairly drastic fall off.
Behind it. Right.
Okay. That little fall off and that elevation, and you can Google this, is called the Bragg peak, Bragg peak. That is very specific to proton therapy,
Okay.
but it's only external beam.
Right. No
There's
inter.
no
Yeah.
there's no internal beams with protons. So you have photons, protons, different types of internal beam, whether it's brachytherapy with iodine or some other substance. And so those are the basic three types of. Now, people will say, well, do you have a true beam or do you have a halcyon?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like saying, well, do you like a Chevy or do you like a Ford? Right?
Gotcha.
They
Gotcha.
all are going to do the same thing. It's just, which do you like?
And
Now,
and
in
are
our
those more directing, how
uh,
does that differ? I mean, from
was
those two
was
from the
target
others.
specific. Now
Okay.
we have a true beam and we have a halcyon.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is the halcyon sort of works in an arc, and it's supposed to tighten up the treatment in a much more confined space. But the difference is not that significant. We can
Okay.
also do that with true beam because we can modulate that beam. We can think of Go back about 30 years. So if you go back about 30 years, think of water coming out of a shower head, okay? This
Mm-hmm.
is radiation coming out of a machine. So 30 years ago, all the water will come out, every drop will come out at the same time. You could not modulate each of those drops.
Right.
Well, with TrueBeam and Halcyon and modulated therapy, as opposed to all the water coming out at the same time, you can modulate every single one of those drops to different speeds so you can paint, if you will, the target.
Mm.
And it makes a world of difference because the goal is to get the maximum dose to the target, whatever that target is. Listen, the smallest organ in the body is called the pineal gland.
Okay.
Pinel. That's a little gland in the brain. Unfortunately, children can get something called a pineoblastoma, which is an aggressive brain tumor.
Mm.
We can treat that with radiation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can treat the brain with radiation and miss all of those eloquent structures like the frontal lobe and
Open.
the
Right.
you can treat any organ in the body. The prostate is a simple one, but when you get into the brain, you really have to
Really
get
have to be
very
pinpoint.
specific, right?
Right. Right.
But it's
Exactly.
the same technology we use to treat the prostate. There's no difference.
So it seems that you offer a lot of choices, and from just the radiation part, I mean, choices we all, oops, sorry about that. Get a little excited. But choices that, just they're all a ton of them out there. Every time I'm looking and researching, there's something new. Um, so a man comes to you, and how do we make a decision on, do we want to go with the precision? Do we want to go with the seeds?
Mhm.
And how do you guide a man? How do you guide someone? And I understand it is, the patient's decision, but are there different um diagnoses that say, well, this will be better, or this will be more effective, or
Mhm.
um, how do we make that
Right.
choice?
Reggie, some of it is dictated by the patient absolute cancer itself. There are five risk categories for prostate cancer. Five. Because it's not a binary process. I do or I don't have prostate cancer. The question is it high risk? Is it low risk? So
Hmm.
there are five risk categories, coming from the least aggressive to the most aggressive. There's something called the very low risk prostate cancer group,
Hmm.
low risk prostate cancer group, intermediate risk prostate cancer group, high risk prostate cancer group, and very high risk. All of those risk categories are dictated by one, your PSA,
Hmm.
your prostate specific antigen, that's the blood test.
Hmm.
Your Gleason score, that's the score you're getting once they've obtained the biopsy.
Hmm.
That tells you potentially how aggressive a cancer is. How many of those cores that they took, say if they took 6 different cores or
Hmm.
12 different
Right.
cores, how many of those cores were positive? And if they were positive, what percent positivity? For example, if I had prostate cancer and you're my physician, you're my urologist, I come to you and say my PSA was 5.5, which is elevated,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
So you would like to do a biopsy. You may or may not want to do an MRI, an ultrasound, all of those stuff, but just let's do the biopsy.
Okay.
So you're going to do 12 different regions. You're going to do 6 biopsy from the right side of my prostate, 6 from the left, but you're going to do 4 from the top, 4 from the middle, and 4 from the bottom for a total of 12.
Okay.
Now, those specimens, they go to the pathologist.
Right.
Then it becomes a binary process. Is it or is it not cancer? Once they define, yes, it is cancer, Not all prostate cancers are the same. They're like human beings. They can have different levels of aggressiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Then the pathologist, looking under the microscope, will assign a score depending on how angry the cancer looks under the microscope.
And that's the Gleason score,
That's
right?
the Gleason score.
Okay.
Now, the old system is from 2 to 10. Now, having said that, you rarely ever see a man with a Gleason less than 6. It's almost non existent.
Mm.
So, most men will either have a Gleason 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10.
Okay.
The higher the number, the more aggressive it is.
Right.
But most men will either have a Gleason 6 or 7. And so now you're looking at, well, what percentage of that one core has cancer? Is it 10% or is it 90%?
Mm-hmm.
I.e., you're trying to determine the volume of cancer within the prostate, because that can also be prognostic.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on which of those 5 categories you fall into, certain treatments may be accommodating to you. For example, if you're in the very low risk, let me just define that. I'm not going to go through all the risks, but let's just define what's very low risk. Very low risk means that your PSA was elevated, but it was less than 10.
Okay.
You had a biopsy. You did have cancer. It was a Gleason 6.
Okay.
It was in positive in 2 cores or less. And of those cores, it involved less than 50%.
Gotcha.
So that's a very low risk.
Mm-hmm.
So for that man, what options are available to him? Brachytherapy by itself would be more than optimal for him because he has such low volume early stage disease.
Right. And it's self-contained in the prostate.
And it's contained.
Yeah.
Robotic surgery. If you go to a robotic surgeon, that's learning curve is steep. So you want someone who has done at a minimum 500, ideally 1,000.
1,000, right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got brachytherapy, you got robotic surgery, proton beams if you choose to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have true beam and halcyon. Those are all external beam radiation.
Mm-hmm.
One option we haven't talked about was many of these prostate cancers are indolent, meaning they grow extraordinarily slowly. Is active surveillance. You watch it.
Right.
But when you do active surveillance, I always tell patients, what are you watching for and how long you're going to wait?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You got to have an answer to both of those questions.
Right.
But if you choose active surveillance, especially men of African heritage, I always quote this one study from Johns Hopkins. And I said to just about every man of African heritage, when they want to choose active surveillance, Johns Hopkins used to be the mecca of prostate cancer. It's up in Baltimore.
Right. Yeah.
Well, they did a study, I think it was 2014. And what they did is that they did radical prostatectomies on African American men, white men. And these men had very early stage prostate cancer. They would have been ideal candidates for active surveillance, but they didn't want any part of it. They wanted out.
Right.
And they took it out. Well, all of these men were initially diagnosed with very low risk cancers. Gleason 6 or less, 2 or less cores, less than 50%. PSA was less than 10. But when they went to do surgery on these men, now they had the entire prostate to do the pathological evaluation. So 13% of white men were upgraded. That is, the Gleason score went from 6 to 7 once the pathologist had the entire the prostate.
Prostate, right.
29%, almost a third of men of African heritage were upgraded. That is, The biopsy Gleason was not indicative of the actual Gleason throughout the entire prostate because of a sample, and no fault through the pathologist or the urologist.
Right. Yeah.
Whenever you do a biopsy, it's the sort of needle in the
Yeah.
haystack, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I always quote that to men of African heritage to say, if you're going to do active surveillance, don't just go by the Gleason score and the PSA. Now we have genomic testing, genomics, genetics.
Mm-hmm.
There are three genomic assays out there. Genomics means that they actually go take the tissue from the cancer and they interrogate the DNA to determine on a genetic level, not just from the microscope, how aggressive is this cancer. And they'll give you the probability of succumbing to this cancer in 10 years if you elect active surveillance versus surgery versus radiation. And there are three genomic tests out there. One is called Prolaris, Prolaris.
Okay.
The other is called Decipher, Decipher. And the other one is GPS. The two most commonly used is either Prolaris or Decipher.
Mm-hmm.
It does not require an additional biopsy. They can get the sample from the pathology lab and they'll send it to a genomic test where they do all kinds of genetic testing. I highly recommend that to every single man who's going to do active surveillance because, for example, it'll come back and it'll give you three numbers. It'll get like the Polaris, for example. It'll come back and give you a Polaris score on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 means this cancer is almost like not being cancer. 10 means you need to get treatment like yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then they'll say if you elect active surveillance, and active surveillance does not mean you're not doing anything. It means you're getting your PSA checked.
Yeah. Every 3
Okay.
months or so or whatever.
Every 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
You may want to get an MRI 12 to 18 months and you want to be examined. What's the probability of succumbing to this cancer in 10 years? Is it 1.1%? Or is it 3%? Or is it 20%? So that's just some additional information for the physician and for the patient to make an informed decision. Okay, well, I have genetically this cancer. It's not an aggressive cancer.
Right.
You know, God has given us something that sometimes we take for granted that have kept us alive longer than we probably know. It's called the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It not only fights viruses and bacteria, but it also fights cancer. Probably fight more cancer than we realize.
We know, right.
Okay.
Right.
And so now we're into immunotherapy now. I mean, that's a big thing in cancer. Immunotherapy basically just enhances your own immune system to fight the cancer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not chemotherapy. It's not radiation.
Right.
It's immunotherapy. It's enhancing your immune system. Well, why didn't it fight that cancer? Because cancer can move in the cloak of darkness and disguise itself as you.
Right.
Immunotherapy takes that disguise away.
Right.
And so, but if you're going to do active surveillance, and you would only recommend active surveillance, by the way, remember I said there are 5 risk groups?
Mm-hmm.
And the very low risk, and occasionally the intermediate risk. You would not recommend active surveillance in high risk or very high risk. Those patients need to be treated.
Right. Is that something that insurance will cover? And
oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Because I know some guys right now that are in active surveillance. I think a lot of times we the PSA is important. We put a lot of credence in the PSA, and I think sometimes to our fault, It's like I had one guy say, well, I went in, I'm active surveillance, my PSA was 5, but man, the last PSA I had was 4.3. And so, they're feeling good about the fact that it's going, that time it was down. So I can just kind of extend this active surveillance, as long as it kind of fluctuates like that. Um, and so I think that because I did active surveillance for a while. I didn't that back in the day, I
Hmm.
didn't have the Geno test and
Hmm.
things, but I mine was and something interesting you said was my Gleason score was 6, and that's the other thing too. I think a lot of guys when they hear 6 out of 10, they get really scared. Why isn't it 3 or why isn't it 2? But it's interesting that you said in most cases it's pretty much going to be 6,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so I think we kind of get a little, kind of like intense, but oh man, it's 6 out of 10. Oh my goodness. Um, but my cancer, I had to remove my prostate removed. You and I, a matter of fact, I went
Right.
to see you
I remember.
initially,
Right.
and then I came back and counseled with you when it came back as a
Right.
biochemical reoccurrence,
Biochemical recurrence.
which which is a nice way of saying kind of it's bad. It's like okay, because I was like,
Right.
that's cool, but then I figured out, oh, okay, it's back. Um, and after 12 years, that was a little discerning because I really didn't expect that. After 12 years of having it being undetectable, and it just went up
Right.
to like 0.25 and then kind of
Right.
gradually went up from there. um but it's good to know that so if you're in active surveillance, it would help to have one of these done, so you
Or
gives you a little bit more information, right, going forward.
absolutely. I would highly recommend anyone who's undergoing active surveillance get one or three of those genomic assays. And just one comment about the PSA.
Hmm.
The PSA came into practice in the mid 1980s. It's by no means a perfect test. It's an indicator
Right.
because I tell men 18% of men, almost 1 out of 5, will have and I'm going to put this in quotation mark, a normal PSA, but still have prostate cancer.
Mm. Yeah.
18%. So the PSA can fluctuate because remember, it's all about disturbance of the prostate. So if you have prostatitis, if you're an active bike rider, we sit on our prostate when we ride bikes.
Hmm.
Anything that can cause irritation can cause the PSA to go up. Sexual activity
Activity, right.
can cause it to go up. So even after a rigorous exam, if you do a digital rectal exam, can sometimes falsely elevate your PSA. But the PSA is not a direct linear line. It can fluctuate.
Hmm.
So it can be 5 and 4.5. It doesn't mean that things are getting better. So always look at the entire picture. What's your Gleason score? What's your PSA? What's the volume of disease? And by the way, what did this genomic assay say in terms of the genetic aggressiveness of this cancer?
Hmm.
We have moved from under the microscope, okay, until the bench in the lab looking at DNA for not just prostate cancer, but for many other cancers.
Yes. Right. Right.
But just to let you know, of all men who undergo a radical prostatectomy, about 28, almost 30% will have a biochemical recurrence.
Mm.
Now, 70% of those recurrence will recur within the first 5 years.
Hmm.
All right. But 25% will recur between years 5 and 10.
Hmm.
You fell into that 5% that recurred after 10
10
years.
years, right.
Okay. So
Is there any research as to why that happened, or just that's what it is?
is the only predictable thing about cancer is its
Predictable.
unpredictability.
Yeah.
As soon as you think you're smart enough to know how cancer is going to behave,
Yeah.
doesn't work. It's, they can sometimes be quite unpredictable. Now, what we do know, the later you recur,
Mm-hmm.
the better the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you had your radical prostatectomy day one and 12, 13 months later you fail, that's not a good sign.
Right. Right. That's
Okay.
yeah. Something else was going on, right?
Right. Probably at the
Yeah.
time of surgery, but
Surgery.
they were under the radar.
Right.
So, but when the later you recur, if you get the appropriate treatment, for which I think you did, then the better the outcome.
Which leads me to, as we kind of wrap up, two couple of questions. Prosticision. Can you explain that, and then also kind of what to expect as far as with radiation in these different
Mhm.
different types of treatment? What can what can someone expect as far as healing and outcome
Mhm.
and some of the side effects?
Right.
What can we look for?
Well, first, prosticization is a term we just coined.
Mm-hmm.
We just trademarked the name. Okay, it's just it's like you trademark different types of language.
Yeah, sure.
It's just language, right?
Yeah,
Prostarcision. It sounds
yeah.
great. Prostarcision. It's precise. It's not surgery. So it just has that trademark, and it was basically for marketing.
I got
I'm
you.
just being completely transparent here,
Sure,
okay?
sure.
But let me just tell you what that entails. It basically means you get brachytherapy first,
Mm-hmm.
followed by external beam, either with true beam or halcyon. And that is called combined simultaneous radiation because you're getting radiation from two sources
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously.
Okay.
That's what prosticization is. Now, it's the first group to do it was from Sweden. They did this back in the 70s, but they didn't name it.
Mm-hmm.
The founder of my practice named it.
Okay.
Okay. But if you go to some other institutions, they may give you both treatment, but it's in a different sequence. They may give you external beam first, followed by brachytherapy.
Now, are you treating the external beam? Is it also treating the prostate or areas around the prostate or both? How does that?
Well, the
I
yeah,
know
the ex
brachy is in the prostate, so we
yeah,
know
the
that, right?
external beam is treating the prostate,
Mm-hmm.
the periprostatic tissue. That's the tissue immediately adjacent around the prostate,
Mm-hmm.
and the seminal vesicles, which sits on top of the prostate and back of the bladder.
Mm-hmm.
So there's three areas that's being treated very tightly with external beam. So external beam is given Monday through Fridays, takes about 10 to 12 minutes per day, and
Mm-hmm.
it's usually given for 6 weeks.
Okay.
So implant first. So day one. So if you want to have prosticization, day one would be the implant, outpatient procedure, 20 to 30 minutes under anesthesia. You go home the same day.
Mm-hmm.
Day 21, 3 weeks after you've had the implant, we commence with the external beam.
Okay.
That goes for 6 weeks. That is prosticization or combined simultaneous radiation. We do it reverse from most academic institutions, but we've treated now north of 20,000 men with that
Mm-hmm.
procedure.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of side effects, as I tell patients, everything we do in medicine
Cancel. Yeah.
potentially,
Yeah.
I'm going to underline, potentially has some side effects. Even if it's 1/10 of 1%, one out of 1,000,
Right.
we have to mention it. So the most common side effects of radiation for the prostate is fatigue. About 20 to 25% of patients may experience some level of fatigue, but it's usually very mild fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And if it occurs, it could last up to 2 to 3 weeks after you've completed all the radiation. Invariably, it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
The next most common side effects will be of urinary because the urethra goes directly through the middle of the prostate
Prostate,
as it
right.
entering the bladder. So, depending on the size, shape, and geometry of your prostate, about 15 to 18% of men may experience some mild, temporary urinary symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
I, i.e., urgency of urination,
Mm-hmm.
frequency of urination. Occasionally may have small amount of blood. That's an inflammatory response. And sometimes I would analogize to slamming your finger in the door.
Right. Yeah.
First, there's pain, then it swells, then it turns black and blue,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you don't keep slamming your finger in the door, the body repairs itself.
Right. Right. Right.
So the rectum sits right behind the prostate. The distance from the back of the prostate to the front of the rectum is only about 3 to 5 millimeters. So if you have a history of hemorrhoids,
Mm-hmm.
we can temporarily aggravate those symptoms in about 8% of men, but most of the time, over the counter preparation will help with that. Now, the main function of the prostate is in all men, you, me, and all
Mm-hmm.
men on the planet, is the production of
Mm-hmm.
seminal fluid.
Right.
The little tiny cells in the prostate that are responsible for producing that fluid, those could be some of the cells involved with cancer.
Mm.
So, as those cells die, as they should and will,
Mm-hmm.
the function of those cells will be diminished. So, men may still be able to have an erection, the sensation of an orgasm, but you end up having what we call a dry orgasm.
Right. Right.
Now, remember, the prostate itself is not responsible for you and I or any man having an erection, but the nerves and blood vessels that are, they encase the prostate. So, depending on the anatomy of the men, of all the men that we treated, the 20,000 plus, 1 out of 7 may have had some degree of erectile dysfunction
Dysfunction.
because of decreased blood flow.
Mm-hmm.
Many of those men could respond to the various medications on the market, be it Viagra, Cialis, or Levitra. But it also depends on whether a man has hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol, because all those could be co-founders for decreased blood flow.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it's about maximizing your benefits and minimizing the adverse side effects. But a lot of it also depends on the sensitivity of a man to radiation. Not all men will have the same sensitivity, but most men do very well
Mm-hmm.
because the technology we have today is so much more sophisticated and eloquent than the technology was, say, 10, 12 years ago. But you do have choices, and that's the key. Understand your choices, make certain you get all of your questions answered, and then at the end, you need to make an informed decision what is in the best interest of you and your family. Get it done so you can get that checked off your to do list. But more importantly, go to your primary care physician, get screened every single year starting at age 40.
40. Yeah. Yeah. I tell people all the time that, my wife coined the phrase, maybe I should get that one like copywritten. She said life over libido. Which, we kind of tend to want to have it all. And like you said, you've got to make a responsible choice and you want to be around. I just turned a granddad and I'm just blessed that I'm still here after the cancer initially and then the biochemical reoccurrence so I tell men all the time. I look at my granddaughter and I'm like, hey, that trumps just about anything.
Oh,
Just being able to
absolutely.
be here and be with family. But as we close out, that kind of leads me to the next one. And you talked a little bit about it just now. What advice you give the patients or loved ones that just starting their cancer treatment journey and they feel really overwhelmed? I think you talked a little bit about, knowing kind of where you are and knowing what to do. And, you know, there's so much out there, man. You
Mhm.
Google this thing and it is just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things about, you know, people will absorb that word very differently. You know, some men come in, Doc, I'm ready, let's get this done. And others come in, you can see the fear has just engulfed their entire soul. And those patients, you just got to understand that, you know, we're all going to be confronted with something in
Hmm.
life. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter. Something's going to confront us, whether it's coronary disease, someone having an MI or a stroke. If we live long enough, we're going to have to contend with
It was
these things.
something. Yeah.
And cancer is one of those things that we have to contend with. But cancer is so highly curable today, especially prostate cancer. And that's what you really try to emphasize, that unfortunately it comes under this umbrella of cancer and it carries certain connotations. First, if you know someone who may have had it, there's nothing like someone who's gone through the process, because
Hmm.
you could connect in a way that I can't connect,
Right.
right? Because you have had that experience, you've gone through it. And I find that that can sometimes be more helpful than me giving them numbers and statistics, because that's just another way of overwhelming them.
Hmm.
And understand that, listen, a good friend of mine went through, I'm going to talk to him or her. Some people find support groups helpful, others may not. So you have to find your own space and always try to make certain you get your questions answered. If someone says that this is your cancer and this is what you need, and don't give you options,
Right.
then that's not the place you want to be,
Right.
right? But ultimately, prostate cancer, just like most cancers who are detected early, you need to just cross all the T's, dot all the I's, and don't leave any stones unturned. And just know that don't let the cancer define you and define your life. It's a problem, just like any other problems. You analyze the problem, you determine how you're going to approach the problem, you solve the problem, and you try to get that problem behind you so you can be looking at it through your rearview mirror. But
Hmm.
ultimately, reach out, try to get as much information. You know, the internet and the website is full of promise, but boy, it's full of peril.
Oh my
And
goodness. Yeah.
sometimes I think there's more peril than promise at times,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And so you don't want information overload. You want, it's just like anything else. You want optimal information, information that's going to give you the right information to make an informed decision. Because you're right. If you go, you Google, God knows the thing about Googling, they rarely have references.
Hmm.
It's a lot of it is anecdotal,
Hmm.
right?
A lot, and there's a lot of clickbait out there too, right? Just these sensational, like, oh, there I go again, get excited. These sensational thumbnails, if you will. I learned a lot
Well,
about that than doing this podcast. I mean, it's like cure cancer in 5 days. You know, prostate cancer is you don't have to live with it. Da, da, da. It's amazing
oh
to
yeah.
me.
And
And
you know, a lot of questions I sometimes get asked, and they go, well, why is this affecting black men in such disproportionate amount? And that's a very good question.
mhm,
We don't have a direct answer, but if you, and sometimes I don't use the word race, because I think race, social scientists define race as a social construct,
yes, it
meaning
is
that society has
determined.
identified it,
Mhm,
but it's not based on biology.
mhm.
Okay? So let's use ethnic group. We're all a part of some ethnic group, every single one of us, whether we came from West Africa, East Africa, or South Africa. We all are connected to some ethnic group. So different ethnic groups will have a tendency to develop certain types of cancer, whether it's genetic predisposition or common environmental factors or whatever. For example, Ashkenazi Jewish women have a very high rate of having genetically driven cancer in both breasts.
Mm,
Chinese men have an extraordinarily high rate, almost eightfold more than the general population, of developing what we call nasopharyngeal carcinoma.
Mm, wow.
African Americans, ours just happens to be prostate. Could have been something else,
Right. Right.
right? So when you look at it in those terms, it's not like, well, here it goes again, black men are yes, we do. We are diagnosed more commonly, and we tend to succumb to this cancer. But part of it could be social economics. You
Mm-hmm.
have more African American men living in distress environment. Scientists are now looking at what we call stress genes. That is, genes from being exposed to chronic stress,
Mm,
and how those genes may play havoc on the body and predispose to certain types of ailments, not just hypertension, not just diabetes, not just strokes, not just because they have looked at that for those conditions.
right.
But
Right.
now they're looking at it from an oncological perspective because the genomic, if you look at the number of genes in the human species, on average, we have 25,000 genes. All of those genes serve a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
whether they serve a purpose for our personality, purpose for our height, the purpose for who we love and
Right.
who we don't love, every single one of them. But those genes can sometimes behave according to what type of environment you're being exposed to. That's called epigenetics, meaning we're born with fixed genes, but because we're born with this distress environment, what does that do to those genes in terms of how they turn on themselves and the
Mm-hmm.
cells in the body to make them cancer? Now, that's all speculative, but I think there's some legitimacy to that in terms of this chronic being exposed to chronic stress. If you're waking up
And you
and you
stressful.
having
Yeah.
to worry about whether or not somebody's gonna pull out and I'm gonna get shot by going to the 7-Eleven. Just imagine living in that every single day.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you and I are from Savannah. I mean, we remember certain characters in high school. I won't
Oh yeah.
call any names,
No,
okay?
don't call no
All
names,
right,
but I
no
do.
names,
Yeah.
no names. But they were from certain parts of the city,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
So,
we
but
had to deal with it. Yeah. Yeah. That's something that we definitely have to investigate and talk about down the road. But we're getting close to an hour, and I want to just thank you. I know you got to get up because you got your scrubs on. You can't be just hanging out. And it's Thursday night football, so I don't want to keep you from. I think is Dallas playing tonight. I'm not a big Dallas fan, but uh,
no, no.
yeah,
Who's one of our high school guys? Man, he was a diehard Dallas fan. You couldn't say anything bad about Dallas.
I don't know what it is about Dallas that makes people crazy. But
I don't
yeah,
know.
Dr. Benton James, I just want to thank you for being a part. We're gonna have to come, get you back on real soon and talk some more. I enjoy our conversations. I remember when I first went to see you that 12 years ago, and we were kind of we went through all of the processes and choices, and then we just talked about people we knew and back in the day. And I always enjoy our conversations, and I thank you too, just for your guidance. And in both my journeys, you've been there, so I really appreciate all that you do each and every day. And please give my best to Eleanor, and happy holidays to you and the family. And thanks again for being a part of this. We appreciate you.
Well, it's I'm happy to do it, Reggie, and it's always good to reconnect. You but please give my regards to your family, and I hope you guys enjoyed the holidays. And let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. And remember, not to equal, but excel.
You got it. You know it.
All right, James. Thank you so much. We
All right,
appreciate you.
Reggie. You guys take care, and thanks
All
again.
right. Okay, and for those of you, not to equal but excel is our high school motto. So slogan motto, he would know that. And that's also the beginning of our, not to equal but excel. But anyway, that's a different thing. But thank you, Dr. Benton, for joining us on this episode of If You Are My Brother's podcast and for sharing information that we can truly turn health awareness into health action. Now, we will post the Radiotherapy Clinic of Georgia's website on and in our show notes. So definitely you can check them out. Wealth of information there, including a prostate cancer guide book as well. So we have the link, will be in the show notes to that too. And we want to thank everyone for sharing your comments, questions. I hope that we provided you helpful information and supported others with similar inquiries. We want to thank you for being a part of this conversation. As I mentioned at the start of the show, we were in this together. And if this episode resonated with you, we want you to ask that you share it with a loved one, like and subscribe. You can connect with us via email, social media, even traditional mail. My wife likes, I always say, call it snail mail through the postal service. And you can listen to past episodes at ifyouaremybrothers.org. Now you can sign up there. You can sign up for our e-newsletter. As a matter of fact, I think it's coming out in about a week or so, right before the holidays. Finally, If You Are My Brothers is a nonprofit 501c project dedicated to prostate cancer awareness and health action. And we hope you will support us in what we do. Now, here's a slide. I think Danny has it with giving options. So if you're listening to our podcast, the link is in our show notes. And when you make a contribution, you will receive your very own If You Are My Brothers commemorative mug. And we want to thank Atlanta Brand Central for providing our new mugs for us free of charge. It's a donation, and we really want to thank Daryl Armstrong and the folks at Atlanta Brand Central for all they do. Their website, by the way, their link is in our show notes as well. Now you will be entered into a drawing for a chance to win an original painting of what we like to call our Everyman logo by renowned artist Cecil Bernard. You can kind of see it right here in the back. I have it on display. And at the end of the month, someone's going to get this, so it's not going to be on my wall anymore. But this is a one of a kind. It's if you don't know Cecil Bernard, we'll have a link to all of his work as well. And we have that for you. So every time you come to the website, you don't have to give, but if you do, we'll enter your name into the hopper, and at the end of December, we'll be pulling your name, hopefully, for that really nice painting. Now, the audio version of this episode will be released next Wednesday on Apple, Spotify, and other major platforms. So you'll get that as well. And additionally, all episodes are archived on our YouTube channel, so you can go back. And as I mentioned before, the very beginning, we do have a number of episodes that we're specifically looking at various treatments. So we'll have experts like Dr. Benton on to really talk about in depth, as you make your decisions. So definitely start kind of searching for those as you see them archived on our website. Special thanks to our producer, Daniel Garcia Pozo in the backgrounds, clicking all the buttons, to Zach Reynolds at Borkhouse Productions for our opening. And remember, this podcast is, again, not a replacement for medical advice. Always confer with your healthcare providers about your health. That's important. Now, join us for our next episode. I think it's going to be Thursday, December, I want to say 20th. Is that right? Yeah, I think so. Right before the holidays at 7 p.m. We've got a very special guest, David Moffitt, who is a survivor advocate. I mean, this brother really, really has some great stories and just is an inspiration. So join us for that. And we look forward to David on our next episode on, I think, the 20th. So that's about it. If You Are My Brothers is a project of Straight Street Media. And you can learn more about Straight Street Media, which is a nonprofit organization, at straightstreetmedia.org. So until next time, if you are my brothers, you will share this message. Take care. Stay healthy. Peace. Happy holidays.